I'm just going to say a few words. One of the things that I enjoy the most about my new job as Chief Exec of the Green Finance Institute is that I get to spend time with people who are so committed to this agenda, full of great ideas, and we have such good discussions. And that's certainly been my day today, and I hope that's been true of you as well. I also sometimes get to meet real titans of our movement, people who have really changed the agenda on the global stage. And sometimes I even get to introduce them, and that is one of these moments right now, because I am absolutely delighted to introduce our final speaker for the day, Lord Deben, Chairman of the Climate Change Committee. And I won't do justice to his CV without actually reading some of the points that we have here. So I'm sure most of you know this already, but for anyone who doesn't know, the Right Honourable John Gummer, Lord Deben Chairman, was the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Food between 1989 and 1993, and he was the longest-serving Secretary of State for the Environment the UK has ever had. His 16 years of top-level ministerial experience also include Minister for London, Employment Minister, and Paymaster General in Her Majesty's Treasury. He has consistently championed an identity between environmental concerns and business sense. To that end, he has set up and now runs Sancroft, a corporate responsibility consultancy working with blue-chip companies around the world on environment, social and ethical issues. As I mentioned, Lord Deben is chairman of the Committee on Climate Change. He's also on Valpac Limited and the Association of Professional Financial Advisors, and we are absolutely delighted to have him say a few words to us on, to close our day today. Thank you. Over to you, Lord Deben.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to start in rather a surprising way. I want, first of all, to say, are we not very lucky to be living at this moment? Because this is the crucial moment in which human beings can sort out their future. And in order to explain that, I want to point out how things have changed. We've been on this planet for 900,000 years, and it took us 850,000 years to domesticate the horse. And it then meant that Nebuchadnezzar's armies moved at the same speed as Napoleon's and Wellington's armies moved. And perhaps that just puts into context what has happened in the last 200 years. It is an absolutely different world. And when we were taught history at school, and in whichever country it was, no one ever got that over to me, and certainly not to my children, because it isn't the stuff of life. What normally happens is that people think that life just goes on, century after century. I want to start by saying we're living in a wholly different world. And the difference is that human beings have taken control of the world in a way which we have never done before. And it started 200 years ago, and it's getting faster and faster all the time. And because we have taken control of the world, the responsibility that we now have and the danger in which we now are is quite different from anything that we've ever seen before. Now, for the public sector, of course, the fascinating thing is that the private sector has recognized that. It is a different world from the world in which, when I was a minister, I was beginning to press what today would be called the green agenda. As a Minister of Agriculture and then as a Minister for the Environment, most of the time you were pushing against the established companies, organizations, professional bodies. You would have a national farmers' union in every country, which would find these issues almost impossible to talk about. And you'd certainly have an industry and a financial sector who would try to explain to you how these were merely add-on extras if they were there or not. And yet I can say in my own business, I have today spent 3 meetings with major investment companies who are way down this route about what the green future is, absolutely committed to the fact that they have to be there, because if they're not there, then their businesses will not be there. They have caught it. They understand it. I summed up at a day's conference yesterday of the Association of those who advise people in Britain on their investments, wealth managers and financial advisors. I was utterly fascinated to see the degree to which the issues which they are most concerned about were the issues that 5 years ago they wouldn't even have begun to talk about. And so the first thing I want to say to you very strongly is that the public sector, in which I believe very considerably, after all, 16 years of my life spent as a minister, 40 years of my life in Parliament, in one house or the other, I have to say, I want the public sector to be what it can be at its best and to flourish. So the first thing it's got to do is to recognise that actually business is right on the front foot on this, and that we cannot allow it to get out of step with us. I remember times when the public sector was in front. It isn't today in most countries. Secondly, one of the reasons that we found things difficult in the past was because we felt we always had to argue the case for what we were doing on a social or political basis. That isn't true any longer, because the case for what we want to do is the only economic, financial profit case that there is out there. And people who don't understand that don't understand about the best part of sustainability. For many years we have advised Coca-Cola. And I always remember a chairman of Coca-Cola saying to me 20 years ago, look, when I say sustainability, the first thing that means is that I want to be here, this company wants to be here in 100 years' time. That's what sustainability means to me, first of all. And what business has understood is that if it wants to be here in 10 years' time, leave alone 100 years' time, these issues which you have been discussing, these green issues, are crucially important. Because if they are ignored, then the huge cost of everything from the investments that they have made that are no longer returning profits, the businesses that they were once in which no longer people wish to buy from, and the reputations which they once had which have been destroyed, means that they will just not be there. And companies that don't recognise that, of course, litter our history. Arthur Andersen, Kodak. Just think of the businesses which didn't understand that they had to move and change. And the Kodaks of the past, there are many, many more Kodaks of the future. And those of us who care about the public sector recognise that our job is to make sure that in our countries, businesses don't get into that position, because it is on their profitability that we as a public sector are bound to depend. So helping them to do this job properly is crucially important. So the next point I want to make very clearly is that cooperation with business, cooperation with the private sector is hugely important, and they want it. And it isn't old-fashioned cooperation. In the past, they wanted it because they wanted our money, or they wanted it because they wanted our cover. They wanted to do something because the state, in one way or another, wanted them to do it, and they couldn't sell that to their shareholders. Now it isn't like that. What they want to do is to try to find a way forward. Now, it may be that they need government help in one way or another, either resources or money or placement, but the truth is they know why they want it is actually because they want it for their own profitability. And that makes them much more equal partners than we've ever had before. So I beg of you, cooperation with the private sector is now part of what we have to do, first because they want it, and secondly because we can't achieve what we need to achieve unless we're achieving it together. And when I'm talking as chairman of the Climate Change Committee, I try to say to people very simply, if we're going to win the battle about climate change, then we need both the power of the market and the effect of proper regulation. This is not a choice between a regulated economy, everything decided at the centre, and a free enterprise economy of the sort that has no controls at all. It's actually about that cooperation at the heart, with proper regulations, setting proper standards, and a free enough market to compete and to create wealth. Nothing will do this except the strength of the market. But the market must, in fact, be helped by regulation and by the public sector to do its job properly. Now, I may say something which the Foreign Office will be upset about now, so don't listen if you are a supporter of Mr. Trump. The problem is this: Mr. Trump is not a defender of the free market. He is a defender, actually, of those who are in occupation, people who are at the moment running things. What we need is a disruptive economy where you're constantly finding new ways of doing it, and where those who are in charge have got to justify themselves constantly by recognizing the new world in which we are. And one of the things that the public sector needs to do always is to question the occupants and make sure that they are not being misled. When I was a minister, always had people who would come in and say, "Minister, you can't do that because the industry doesn't like it." And then you'd look at it and you'd find what you meant was that those people who happened to have a comfortable position in the industry wouldn't like it. But you could always find other people who knew perfectly well that we had to do it so that the industry could move forward. And the last thing I want to say is this: it's not just a question of cooperation with the private sector. It's a question of cooperation amongst yourselves. And I'm very pleased that Britain has been able to bring such a wide range of people together in order to talk about these issues. Because the real trouble is that this is a battle which is going to be very hard to win. Battle against climate change, the battle to protect our environment, the battle to stop the destruction of biodiversity, the battle to make human beings less rapists and more stewards. Those battles are not easy battles to win. And we will only win them if we don't keep on trying to reinvent the wheel. And therefore, cooperation between countries and even between ministries. I bet you know in your own countries how often it is that one ministry doesn't talk enough to another one. They've got a good idea, you've never heard of it, and vice versa. We really do have to learn to cooperate much more effectively across national boundaries, across parts of the siloed systems which are our government structures. How often it is in Britain, and I know it's true everywhere else, how often it is that you find that the ministry of this is doing something which the ministry of that has never heard of. And if they did it together, it would be doubly advantageous. So cooperation in this sense is absolutely important. And meetings like this, where people can be challenged, where they can be enthused, and where they can be excited, are really, really important. Now, Britain is, of course, at this moment in the course of doing one of the stupidest things that it has done for a very long time, called leaving the European Union. But the fact is we have to overcome the stupidity of that by finding ways of working closer together right across the board. Of course, it's true that we will work closest with our closest neighbours. That is obviously true. But we have to work, all of us, much more closely right across the board. And we have to do that because the issues which face us are global issues, and they have only a global answer. But you can't do global answers entirely on the global scene. You can't do it by signing everybody up. Paris was unique, everybody signed up, but individually they're going to have to meet what they demanded. Country by country, group of countries, neighbours, have got to work this out on that basis so that it adds up to a global solution to what is a global problem. And I began by saying, are we not lucky to live in this moment? I do think it is an exciting and challenging and fantastically edgy moment to be living. In the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si, he makes a number of remarkably insightful points. But for me, the most important one is that he talks about climate change as a symptom of what we've done to the world. All these things are interrelated. Biodiversity, shortage of water, pollution, climate change, all these things are, and poverty, all interrelated. And therefore, when we're talking about green finance, we are applying ourselves to solving the sort of problems which we have created in our colonization of the world, the human beings taking the world over, without learning the responsibility that that position gives us. And the public sector has a particular role to play because it is, in every country, the public sector which ought to be representing the people, society as a whole. And in the way it deals with sectors of society, the private sector and others, it needs to take a real lead. Taking a lead on green finance is crucial if we are going to win through. And it's not crucial tomorrow, it is crucial today. The United Nations has shown very clearly that we have got a single decade to get this whole ship sailing in the right direction. We can't wait, or it will get so far out of control that whatever we do about green finance, we won't be able to find a solution. So as you go off after this conference, I hope you'll take with you very simply, I must cooperate privately and publicly within my government and local authorities and outside. I must do it with an urgency that I haven't thought of before because there is no time to lose. And I must do it with an enthusiasm because I've got a responsibility and a luck of being here at the moment when we can make a real difference. So many are born at a time when it really wouldn't matter what they did. You and I, just all of us, are born at a time when we can change the world and, frankly, when we can save the world.